Alright boys, so it's been about 1 week since the Settlers League has launched, and it's been a pretty overwhelming success. Most people are happy, besides one little issue with some tornadoes that seem to be a little bit overpowered. Most things have gone pretty well. The new economy stuff is really cool with the automatic trading and such. All of the new changes to melee have seemingly been received pretty well, although there is one particular ascendancy that we'll talk about here in a moment that seems to be doing better than others. Typically, about a week into the league, I like making this video where we kind of go over how all of the different builds worked, what ended up being popular, and if anything new kind of popped up. If these kind of videos help you out, make sure to give them a like, and if you want to see more content similar to this, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos. Without further ado, let's talk about the week 1 meta builds. One thing to note is that the biggest takeaway here, and this is kind of what I was saying right from the jump, is that Lightning Strike is just probably the meta skill for this league for right now, until we get closer to about maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the league and we start seeing some like second really powerful builds. When it comes to, if you had to choose one, it's probably Lightning Strike. However, the version that ended up being popular is the Slayer, and this isn't really a super big surprise to me. Slayer is just extremely powerful. Now, if we go here and we do look at Lightning Strike on this list here, you'll see that it's about 49% Slayer. The whole idea here is that Slayer just got an extremely large buff with 1, all of the melee changes, and 2, being able to inherently stack Frenzy and Endurance charges at the same time, and how powerful the new Endurance charges are, really just kind of set this ascendancy apart from everyone else. Realistically, Warden was still fine, and the way that I would go about is, I do think that the Slayer is best. It does have more access to defenses, and you can get similar damage. You can push the damage extremely high. You can still use tinctures on Slayer, it's perfectly fine, but the Warden does have some pretty interesting options for damage as well as for utility type stuff, especially with like Elemental Berserk and things like that. So as I said, this build ended up being super popular, and there are a couple versions that I've linked in the document here. We have a Slayer version from Fubgun. These are all these videos are just gonna be like the most recent videos of that version. This is a very high-end version of it. Slayers tend to go a little bit more on the high-end version. There's other POBs available on his channel. The Warden version from Palstron that I linked in my previous document, this is the most up-to-date video. And then one video that I did see, which was kind of like an experimental Doriani's / PhD shield from Sebk. This is the guy who made the int stack trickster version of Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation last league, and realistically this was kind of a setup that me and the boys over on Discord were kind of talking a little bit about right before the league started. I figured that there would be some kind of Doriani's setup using the PhD shield pop up at some point. It's interesting, but I do think this is one of those, like, if you're good, you can try to mess around with it. Most people should probably just play either the Slayer from Fubgun or the Warden from Palstron. Now, next on this list, we've got the Archmage Hierophant. 13% ended up being in the Hierophant here. Very, very popular. And yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised here. Realistically, I kind of knew that this was going to be the case. Archmage was extremely powerful last league. That's why I suggested it for most people this league. And although there were 1 or 2 problems that I kind of like called out that might be an issue, they were a little bit more of an issue than even I thought. One big change that happened this league is that group magic finding got heavily nerfed and realistically isn't worth it anymore. So the price of any popular but rare uniques that just dropped from generic content, like generic maps, kind of skyrocketed quite a bit, getting upwards of 15, 20, 30 divines at some point. This did affect Archmage builds because of its Zeri's foible. However, you don't really need that item. Everything else, mostly okay. There were some like jewels that had some problems, but a lot of builds got hit really hard with these random, insanely expensive uniques. And this isn't unique to Archmage. Pretty much all of the builds that used any kind of map drop uniques got hit with this a little bit. If you're starting up an Archmage at this point in the league, you can just jump straight into the auto Ice Nova version from Zizaran. I know a couple of people said this isn't Zizaran's build, and I get what you're trying to say. It's basically like a hybrid of the one from Garotha from last league, as well as the one from Palstron last league. It's not really exactly the same as either one of those. Zizaran did put a lot of work into the guide itself. I think it was Zizaran and Zai. So I know a lot of people are like, it's not Zizaran's build. Listen, people don't really own builds anymore, okay? Zizaran put out a POB. It's kind of his own take on it that he played himself in the league. You're watching his video, okay? In the last document document, I did put in this version from Uberdan, which is a Ball Lightning of Orbiting. I think that this is not as good as the Ice Nova version for sure, especially if you're a softcore player, but Dan always puts together some really crazy, powerful builds. He is a master crafter though, so do keep in mind that if you look at Dan's POV and try to get the same gear that he's got, good luck. He also plays hardcore, so if that interests you, then go for it. Either of these are perfectly fine, and I do want to note that there is a small possibility, I haven't seen anything about this yet, that a normal version of Ball Lightning Archmage might pop up again at some point. This is mainly because of the Calandra Mist existing, as well as projectile, like reduced projectile speed being available on amulets. There might be something like this, so if you're interested in that kind of build, keep an eye out for it. Someone will probably put something together, or you can find something on PoE Ninja. That's pretty much it for Archmage. But next, let's talk about bows. Now, bows did not end up as popular as they were before. If we go here to Deadeye and we look at Elemental Hit of the Spectrum, it's about 40%. You've got some people using Tornado Shot as well, and some people using Lightning Arrow. So most Deadeyes are still playing a bow, but Deadeye only ended up about 7%, way lower than it's pretty much ever been in quite some time. However, I would kind of say that potentially at the like middle tier of Deadeyes, that Deadeye bow characters got significantly stronger from last league. Now, I know that there were some nerfs that went through, but the build that I'm personally playing is just the version that is using Uchulas. There is a POB that I'll talk about in a moment that's linked from Fubgun. The whole idea is that you're using a bunch of uniques on this build, so it kind of makes sense to use Uchulas. This was something that I was thinking about a little bit, and Fubgun already, of course, had a POB put together with the entire idea done. So the idea is that you use all of these uniques that have no life on them, and then you craft just a couple pieces of gear that you make sure it has no life modifiers on it, and you can get like 4,600-ish life, as well as all of the benefits of the upgraded taming, which is super duper powerful now, the fledgling, which does a ton of damage. It causes you to have far shot, which is 60% more damage at range, which is also going to be stacking with the normal Deadeye far shot, which is a 30% more damage at range. So overall, kind of just crazy that it's even more powerful than it was before, but it is what it is. Now, as I said, even though this wasn't as popular, probably in my opinion, this is still a better generic farming build than something like Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike is new, it's popular, it's fun, it's different, so if that's what you're looking for, I suggest you probably just go ahead and play Lightning Strike. But if you're just looking for efficiency and you just want something that really just has a bunch of good stuff going for it, the bow Deadeye is still kind of up there. Now, of course, I have linked Fubgun's build sheet here because he doesn't really have a video for the Deadeye because he's not playing it. So make sure to give him a sub over on YouTube. Don't just go to his sheet and don't do anything else. Now, for the next couple of builds that we're going to be talking about, these are builds that are popular. These are builds that are good, but coming from my personal perspective, these are ones that either have problems or ran into issues in the early league, or maybe are not performing as well as some other builds are. And I did want to mention one or two builds that I didn't talk about in the previous video because I didn't think it would be a good idea for people to play them. But at this point, if you're looking for a second build, it might be something worth looking into. Now, first one on that list is going to be Lacerate. So a lot of people love Lacerate. This is one of those more beloved skills of all time. However, I have never really understood why people like Lacerate. I think it feels awful to play. It doesn't matter how much attack speed you get, doesn't matter pretty much any of that. I've always felt that the Lacerate skill in general has felt really, really bad to play. Now, this ended up being super popular. If you look at Gladiator at 13% here, 51% of the people playing Gladiator are playing Lacerate. There's some people playing Spectral Shield Throw, and then a whole bunch of other just like nothing percentages, right? 51% of people playing Lacerate on Gladiator. So obviously it's very powerful. As we move into week 2 and further on, crafting some of the higher end pieces of gear for Lacerate Gladiator will become easier as those materials become more available. So it should be easier. However, I feel like if you're playing Lacerate Gladiator, it might be a good idea to start thinking about transitioning into some kind of Slayer, like Lightning Strike or something like that. It would probably serve you a little bit better just because that build ended up being so powerful and it has so much room to scale. Whereas a Bleed build kind of hits its peak at around 18 to 20 million DPS, even with a ton of gear invested into it. It can get very tanky, don't get me wrong, but you could be doing 50, 60, 70, 80 million DPS probably, and still be tanky, if not tankier, on a Slayer. So, in my opinion, Lacerate, super strong build. A lot of people like it. I personally think it feels terrible to play, so that's my feel on it. There is, of course, a Gladiator that is available as Zizarin, and it's linked here. Next on the list is going to be Hexblast. So this was something that I said could be an issue with Hexblast. A lot of people were like, oh, the helmet's not going to be that expensive. It won't be that bad. And to all of those people that said that, I felt that it was going to be bad, and it did end up being bad. So realistically, now on August 1st, which is today, this helmet is roughly 13 Divine or 2,000 Chaos Orbs. It peaked pretty hard on day 2-ish, and then it went down a little bit, and it's coming back up. The helmet's expensive. You can't really get around it. It's more powerful than it was before, and if you want a very good Sanctum / like really powerful tier 17 farmer, I mean, this is still one of the best builds that exists for that. But just keep in mind, like, it's not a free build. You can do other lower versions of it, and Ventru has put versions of that in there, but as I said in my previous document, this item is probably going to be super expensive, and it did end up being very expensive. So make sure you've got some currency. And of course, the version by Ventrua is linked here. So next on the list, we've got Frostblades of Katabasis. This was the Rue build, and while I do think that the build is still very good, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this build. It just honestly didn't end up being as good as Lightning Strike. I kind of expected this, but even on a Slayer, Lightning Strike just kind of ends up being better. Now, this build, this Frostblades of Katabasis build, is still extremely powerful, uses very, very little gear for its strength, and can scale extremely well, but at the end of the day, if you're just going to be pumping money into it, it really does feel like you should just go with a Lightning Strike-based Slayer. If you're looking for power, but I would say that if you're just looking for something different and you still want to play a Slayer, it's still a very good build. There isn't anything wrong with it, and Rue has been keeping it updated, but Lightning Strike is just going to end up being a little bit better. So that's my suggestion that you play it if you're just looking for raw power. Rue's build sheet is linked here. He does stream on Twitch as well, but he doesn't have a YouTube channel, so I always just link his build sheet right here. So if you're interested in the Frostblades build, make sure to check it out in the build sheet. Now, last on the list, we have this Power Siphon Locus Mines. This build is a little bit strange. It uses a very kind of weird setup. The fact that Power Siphon auto targets enemies around you, and you kind of use Locust Mines to abuse that to get an auto targeting wand ability that typically suffers from not really being able to scale attack speed on it very well, turning it into a mine, which makes it scale extremely well. But it is a little bit clunky. One of the big problems with this build is that it kind of only works at medium range. It doesn't work very close, and it doesn't work very far. And a lot of the time, one of the most powerful positions to be in PoE is either right up in the boss's face or very far away. So if you're a good player, I think that this build is perfectly fine. If you aren't looking to do like super duper high-end content, I think this build is fine. But it does feel a little clunky sometimes, and that's why it didn't go on my top 5 list before. Now, Jung has put out a recent video that has a bunch of high-end versions of this build, so if you're interested in something kind of weird and quirky and a little bit different, make sure to check this out. It's a very good build. There's nothing wrong with it. Just a little bit clunky at the end of the day. As always, the notes for this video will be down in the description below. So remember, boys, if you enjoy this content, give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.